So I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker, Scott Beckerman from USDA-APHIS-Wildlife Services.
Correct, yeah.
Kind of get that right?
Long one.
Yep. And I'll let him kind of introduce himself further if he wishes, but he's going to talk about feral swine.
All right. Get all mic'd up here. Lucky you started early because it'll probably take a couple minutes.
There we go.
We'll stop that here in a minute. Maybe I'll just put it in there. Can you all hear me? We're good to go. All right. How's everybody doing today? It's good to be first. Hope you're not sleeping at the end of this 30-minute session. So I'm Scott Beckerman. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I'm state director with APHIS-Wildlife Services here in Illinois. And you're stuck with me instead of Brad because he decided to take vacation. He's fishing in Florida this week, so you get number 2. That's me. But no, really, it's good to be here. I appreciate Chris inviting us to present on some of the work that we have done here in Illinois related to feral swine damage management. A little bit different than probably what you're most commonly used to seeing in invasive species management. Yeah, it's a vertebrate, but we're talking about a highly intelligent mammal that many a night in the field I thought was more smart than me, and our staff felt that way too. So what are feral swine? They got a lot of names, you know, razorback, wild hog, wild pig, wild boar. We didn't have a good definition that would really fit them in Illinois until the DNR developed Administrative Code Part 700, and they defined in state law what wild swine are. Their populations are individuals of swine that are unrestrained. They have adapted to living in the wild or a free roaming environment. So it separates them from people who have a 4-H hog that's a heritage breed that's not a normal domestic pig. Very careful to define it as living wild in the free, but can be of any breed. And most of them are escaped from pig operations themselves. They were once domestic. Right now, what we see is the majority of them are dumped pets. Everybody wants a cute little pot-bellied pig, but them suckers get big and their turds get big and they're tired of them. And they take them to the nearest forest preserve, forest service ground, rural area, and turn their pig free. And it becomes our problem as natural resource managers. And so the other challenge we have is that, and I'll get to this later, interest in this species by hunters is tremendous. And people want pigs. Natural resource managers may not, but much of the American public does. And so there's been a big interest in relocating these, turning loose truckloads of pigs to create recreational environment for hunting. That's been a problem. So back in the 1500s, the Spaniards originally released swine in the U.S. so that they'd have something to eat when they come back, and they did it on a lot of islands throughout the world. In the 80s, they were primarily found in the southern part of the country. Florida, Texas, and California had the largest populations. Not surprising. Good environment for them. But they expanded through time dramatically. And when we get up to 2018, they were in 45 states. Highest population density still, Florida, Texas, and California. Each of those states have populations over 1 million. There's, potentially tens of millions across the U.S. And in Illinois, you'll see there's one little dot now in Pike County. This map was revised to show that particular spot that we've been working on, and I'll touch on that later in the talk. But to the best of our knowledge, feral swine breeding populations became established in southern Illinois in around 2000. When we started working on them in 2009, it appears that those southern releases had blinked out, thank goodness, down in the Shawnee, because those are very difficult ones to deal with in the vast expanses of forest land. We actually, between 2009 and 2011, confirmed breeding self-sustaining populations in 5 counties, Fulton County, and then a 4-county area down kind of in south central Illinois, and Fayette, Effingham, Clay, and Marion counties. Feral swine And the problem we have with them is they have a tremendous ability to reproduce. Let me get ahead of myself here. They're very difficult to manage because of their ability to reproduce. The adult swine can breed twice a year, 5 to 10 piglets. Juveniles begin to breed at 6 to 8 months of age. So it's a challenge for us. It's not like plants. We're not talking about thousands of seeds or invertebrates maybe in the challenge that you face with them. But remember, these are extremely intelligent animals on the scale in the living world. They're probably the most damaging mammal that we have in North America as far as invasive species go. Big part of it's because they're a habitat generalist. They live all the way from Canada, where it's sub-freezing for weeks on end, all the way down to Mexico, where it's hot. So they can eat on just about anything. They're opportunistic omnivores. Roots, tubers, fruits, nuts, amphibians, reptiles. We have big problems with them in areas where we have sensitive species of reptiles and amphibians. Let's see. Once they reach adulthood, they really have no predators left other than humans, and that poses another problem because the reproducing segment of that population is then unrestrained. Their feeding and rooting behavior is really what's most damaging. You can see here, related to agriculture, they root with their snouts, and they will root right down a row and root out emerging seedlings of corn and soybeans in areas where agriculture is prevalent and they exist. They can do tremendous damage to growing crops. That's feral swine damage to corn. Usually it starts in about the milk stage. So you can see, an acre or two at a time damaged by feral swine, at least in our habitat here. And then the rooting behavior in sensitive areas like wetlands is really the greatest concern for us natural resource managers. You can see up on the top right here. The invertebrates they're going after, and then subsequent to that we see invasions of invasive plants in that disturbed habitat. So that's a great problem for us. So our counterparts in the DNR, as well as us, because we're wildlife biologists, are really most concerned about impacts on native wildlife and wildlife habitat. We see direct predation on ground nesting birds. We're talking about turkey and quail nests, other songbirds, non-game birds. And then they also prey on newborn fawns, rabbits, and so forth. So that not only is this predation an issue, but they directly compete for limited resources, the mast crop. And we have many examples here in Illinois where the swine in an area will devour all the acorns on a ridge in the fall, and the producers, the landowners, the hunters, then notice that the deer and turkey shift their habits. They have no deer and turkey left for a month or two. They'll come through, but the center of activity shifts to where they're going to find forage. So it does affect other wildlife, their competition for limited food resources. Disease threats are another important consideration from feral swine. They carry more than 30 diseases, more than 30 parasites that can be transmitted to people, pets, livestock, and wildlife. Diseases that humans can get from feral swine include salmonella, leptospirosis, tularemia. Let's see. We sample for them in most of the pigs that we collected, and you can see here, this trail is from feral swine coming up to this domestic hog storage bin, that feeder. The feed was spilling, coming up every night, foraging, puts them real close contact with domestic swine, and the disease transmission threats to domestic agriculture, swine production, are great. The Illinois pork producers have a big concern about feral swine in populations that could impact their movement of domestic swine. Swine that we tested in Illinois, low numbers, but did have positives for pseudorabies, swine influenza, toxoplasmosis, trichinosis, and leptospirosis. We also had a number of hunters that hunted in other states come back and then were confirmed to have contracted leptospirosis from the pigs that they were field dressing in these other states. So it's a real threat if they don't take proper precautions. So feral swine in Illinois, we kind of know where they were. We had kind of two populations when we started, Fulton County and then a 4-county region in south central Illinois. as we began to look to work with our partners is to find a way to how do we go about eliminating them. We had a lot of challenges. The first challenge was there were no regulations to prevent people from moving them around and turning them loose. You know, if we were to eliminate them from a county, the people who turned them loose are probably going to turn more loose. That's a battle. So we worked very closely with the DNR. In 2014, they addressed this problem by establishing that Administrative Rule Part 700 that at that point made it illegal to sell swine, to guide for swine, to barter for swine, release them in the wild, this feral aspect as they defined it, and made it illegal to guide for hunts for swine because a lot of these guys would want to turn hogs loose, get them started in an area, run dog hounds, and then guide people so that they could do hog hunts behind hounds, and that's very common in most of the southern part of the country. So that was banned, and the DNR also in that administrative rule put in a section that said that producers of swine have to maintain their fence adequately enough to contain their stock so that producers don't just have free-ranging stock anymore that get out into the wild and cause this problem behind the areas that we clean. The other part of that is they ban shooting of pigs in that rule, but they allow firearms hunters with a valid deer tag in the county they're hunting to shoot swine, but the rule requires them to report the harvest so that we can track in the state where hunters are killing pigs. It's a big part of our program, is to know where these animals are occurring at. So we have the rule behind us. We have the law, the force of law that'll keep areas cleared once we get them cleared. Now we realize we had a huge issue with the public because a big segment of the public is not us. They don't see feral swine as detrimental to the environment. They see them as a recreational opportunity. It's a big problem. So we invested a lot of time in going to the hunting shows, the sports shows, reaching out to the ag producers to tell them the negative consequences of feral swine. We got the Illinois Farm Bureau and the Illinois pork producers behind us to support elimination of feral swine from the state, even though some of their producers who were landowners wanted pigs. As organizations, they stood behind the DNR and the USDA, wanting to try to eliminate them to protect their livelihoods for at least commercial pig production. Let's see. The biggest challenge that we faced was this hunting thing and this public support. The recreational part of that. I know you guys have cable TV. Anybody ever see Motor City Man Ted Nugent? He's got a hunting show. You know, he's up in a helicopter gunning pigs with an automatic AR. I mean, that's entertainment. There's the Pig Man. The Pig Man has a Pig Man Nation. Thousands of people following him on one of the cable channels. That's what we were battling. So we had to carry our message to the public and get the hunters behind us. And over a course of a couple of years, that happened to where we could turn pigs into not be the recreational opportunity they wanted, but yet the animal that's going to cause them to lose their ability to successfully hunt deer, turkey, and other animals. And that's the way we phrased it to them. And I think it worked pretty well. But one other thing we did is we worked with the Wildlife Society to create a position statement for professional biologists in Illinois that supported elimination of feral swine from the state so we could at least get the professionals behind us. So exactly what did we do with our program as we began to implement it throughout the state? In 2011, we began to implement this cooperative program with the DNR. They funded a lot of our work. We had funding that we brought to the table as well, and stood up an integrated feral swine damage management program. Really built it around a free technical assistance program for landowners who identified that they had swine and they wanted to remove them. We could teach them how to do it. We could loan them all the equipment to do it, all the bait to do it, all the cameras to do it, and get them started on the process. And that's a great foundation for our program. But for those of you who work with landowners, you know that many landowners don't live on the land they have. They might live in town, and they own an acreage. It might be 20 minutes away or hours away. And feral swine damage management's tough work. The folks that do that, they're working day and night. Landowners have real jobs. A lot of the work that we do starts at night about dusk, ends around midnight. They'll get a couple hours sleep and they get back up at 3 in the morning and work till after dawn. It's hard to expect a landowner to do that when they got a real job. And so what happened is, a lot of the landowners after they started this realized that this isn't for me, you guys are nuts. They asked us, will you go ahead and get rid of the pigs on our place now? So then we just kind of transitioned into being the people who did the work to remove the swine through this direct control efforts. Focusing on trapping the swine is the most effective method to do that. We established 3 zones in the state, 2 primary damage management zones where we established full-time people in Fulton County, and then 1 down here in that 4-county zone, Fayette, Effingham, Clay, and Marion counties. Wanted to immerse our people in the community so they could be going to church with the landowners. They'd see the landowners when they golf. They'd be having coffee with them. We had to make these people think that we're not the government, but we're one of them. So they're going to let us come on their ground day and night to remove pigs. It's pretty effective. The other zone was the rest of the state that we didn't think we had a breeding population in, and we primarily provided technical assistance in the rest of the state, at least while we focused our efforts on these 2 zones. People would call, we'd try to help them determine if they had pigs, maybe document it and put it down on our checklist to come back to as soon as we had staff that we could put to their area. So how did we get rid of these critters? Recognizing they're not, they're pretty intelligent animals. We primarily used corral traps. We're basically a big steel livestock panel. We put a number of them together in a circle, and you have a gate that drops once the pigs are in the trap. We experimented with a lot of different types of baits, a lot of lures, a lot of pig hormones. Pork industry, they would give us hormones that they used in confinement to cause sows to go into estrus. We tried everything we could to get them into our traps. And it wasn't just us. We have a program in 50 states, so a lot of states are working on this at the same time. But lo and behold, it comes down to pigs are pretty basic. They like to eat sour corn. Didn't matter what we threw at them, sour corn always worked the best. So that was easy to do. We can make it in 55-gallon barrels, 3 sacks of corn, a bunch of water, and some yeast, and they've been making alcohol like that for hundreds of years. Worked for pigs. On top of that, we employed a number of monitoring systems to help improve our ability to detect when pigs are in there. We need to know how many pigs there are. They all have individual pelage patterns. We track the numbers in a group and individuals to make sure we get them all. And these sounders that have home ranges that are very defined. Initially, in some of these areas, there's no cell service, so we employed devices that would send a signal to a satellite when the trap door dropped, and that satellite would text our phone and tell us trap door dropped, probably got some pigs. In areas where we could get cellular service, we started out using camera traps that would send a picture through the cell phone to our phones so we could begin to detect, hey, there's so many pigs in there, we need to set the trap. They're all feeding in there after 2 weeks or whatever. We'd go out, set the trap, and then the next time they'd come in at night, they'd trip it and the door would fall. And that was nice, but it's more work than the later part of the stages of our efforts where they developed camera traps that we could watch the pigs go in there and we could send a signal, and within 3 seconds the door would drop. So our guys would try to sleep at night, getting hundreds of texts all night long about pictures of pigs in their traps or by their traps, and hit the button and then get up in the morning and know that they could count how many pigs they had in the trap when they set it off, and they could check it through the night, go back in the morning, and then euthanize them. So it's pretty effective evolution in trapping technologies. But traps remove a big part of the pigs, but you got a lot of smart ones left. So we had to use other tools on the smart ones. And sometimes there might be 1 or 2 pigs. It's more effective to go in and shoot those than to try to wait 2, 3, 4 weeks to try to trap a couple. So we use very selective sharpshooting, aided with FLIR, forward-looking infrared cameras to detect when those pigs came in at night, because it's all done at night. Our high-powered rifles are all equipped with night vision, so we would remove those individuals. It might be a sow with baby pigs, it might be 1 or 2 boars. Very effective to clean up what you can that you couldn't get through trapping. We got about 90% of the population was what we were guessing through that in each of these management units up until 2014. And that's when we knew you get down to the last few, the hardest animals to get, the smartest ones. Those last ones, they're not going to eat corn if it's the last thing out there because all their buddies died eating corn. You know, they're not stupid. So that's when we worked with the DNR to get the governor's office to allow us to bring in our helicopters to use aerial control to try to remove the last swine that we needed to get. Very political, hadn't been done in Illinois legally for decades, if ever. We got permission to do it, so we moved into those management units with our helicopters and our staff here with shotguns and went in with landowner permission to remove the remaining swine. And it was very controversial with landowners. They're worried about their livestock, their pets, their family. You know, nobody sees helicopters fly over and shoot. You hear about black helicopters doing that all the time from the DNR, but, you know, really? But we were doing it, and they were very concerned. And they were also concerned that, oh, your helicopter's going to scare my turkeys out of here right before turkey season because we're flying right before leaf out is our most effective time. The pigs are stressed right before leaf out with the long winter. But it was very effective for us to use that tool. Really got us to where we needed to be in both of those management units. We also used IDOT's helicopter with very high quality FLIR at mid-level heights up 500 to 1,000 feet during the day and at night to try to pick out remaining populations of pigs so we could focus our efforts in those areas. IDOT was a big help. Unfortunately, their helicopter crashed and they lost that and their FLIR right about the end of our project. So we were very successful in those 2 units. And there was a little spot on that first map about Pike County. And lo and behold, in 2016, we finished things up in about 2014 in those other areas, very successful. Actually, we removed the last 2 pigs late in each of those areas. There was 1 left for about 9 months, and we got one with the cable restraint in Fulton County and got one we shot down in the other area. So go about 1.5 years, we're monitoring things, and we start getting reports of pigs in Pike County. Producers, hunters are telling us, and landowners are telling us that they're seeing pigs and they're causing problems down there. So we start investing time trying to document what's going on in Pike County. Lo and behold, there's a producer, it's been there for a long time, that chose to raise swine without a fence, or at least a fence that would contain swine. Most areas, you know, just about anything could get through his fence. In his mind, it was fine. His neighbors didn't like it. Over a several-year period, his insurance companies paid his neighbors $64,000 in damage claims for damage to their ag crops and yards. He'd just get a new insurance company next year, and this was going on and on and on. So we documented, yes, they're there. Yes, we have a problem. What do we do next? So we work with DNR to get a CPO down there to document the problem, and he issued that landowner a citation under Part 700 for failure to maintain a fence that could prevent the establishment of a feral swine population. The first citation issued in the state under that new administrative rule. Took us about 1 year in court. We spent a lot of time in court with that man and his attorney. And a court order finally declared that all pigs in Pike County that were not contained within a fence, and particularly to him, in a fence in the middle of his farm, were now considered feral. That gave us the legal authority now to begin killing pigs all around his place. Because until then, all those wild pigs he could still claim as his own. It would be covered under the Domestic Animal at Large Act. We would have to trap them, keep them in captivity for 15 days, post it in the paper that we found them, sell them at auction, and give the proceeds to him. So it's very important to get this in the court order. So, as part of that, he also got 6 days in jail and was banned from having any livestock for 2 years. That also helped us. So the court was very serious about this too, thank goodness. So over the course of 8 or 9 months, we captured and euthanized 26 feral swine in that area. He got back as many as he could so he could sell them when he saw which way the flag was flying there. We think we have that population eliminated now, and we'll continue to monitor that for another year or two, just like we did those other areas, to make sure that there isn't something out there we missed. We don't want them to get started again there. So what have we accomplished, over this journey started in about a decade ago now with the DNR and us working closely together? We work with over 100 landowners, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for the work we do, it's a lot of landowners, a lot of land, about 35,000 acres of land our guys were on, daily. We removed 484 swine in total. The key is we removed the breeding populations that are known to exist in the state. People always ask us, well, what do you do with the pigs when you get them? That's a lot of pigs. Everybody wants free pigs, right? They became property of the landowner. That's our policy. Once we remove them on private land, it's up to them to do with what they want. A lot of them they would butcher, using the right precautions and cooking the meat thoroughly, thank goodness. We could not donate them to charity like you see that's done with the deer donation program and other programs, because the Federal Meat Inspection Act requires an ante-mortem and a post-mortem inspection of all meat that goes into the food chain. And it's really hard to get a USDA meat inspector out at midnight to see a live pig before we kill it, and then he can inspect it again afterwards. So unfortunately, most of them were utilized. They went to the landowners and they would give them out to their friends and so forth. So where are we at today? So we continue to monitor the state for reports of pigs. Right now our goal is to detect any emerging populations very early so we can get our assets there to try to prevent establishment. We received 48 reports of feral swine in fiscal year 18, and then since October 1, which is our fiscal year 19, we received another 18 reports of feral swine. This Pike County's colored on there because we're still monitoring that. We think we've got it, but we still have it on our map. I'm still working closely with those landowners. Matter of fact, tomorrow we're going to go in and remove a couple of traps we still have out there. We received 114 reports from hunters that they saw feral swine while they were hunting, and we get that information from the DNR. They have a deer and turkey harvest check line that you have to report your harvest, and one of the questions you're asked if you're a successful hunter is, how many bobcats did you see? How many feral swine did you see? So hunters key in how many they saw. 114 of them came to us that they had saw feral swine. 112 of them were a data entry error, so they hit the wrong key on their phone. Thank goodness. So we had 2 that were actually valid hunter reports, and one of them was the number of hunters in Pike County. That's how we first found it. The other is existing now down in Pope County. We have confirmed, looks like 6 to 8 pigs down there that probably are once domestic that escaped. And so we're actively working down there trying to get access to land and get our equipment up to monitor them. Hopefully we can be successful here over the next few months. I guess I'd wrap up by saying I think our strategy for managing invasive feral swine is very similar to strategies for other invasive species. You want to detect them early, deploy your assets very rapidly, and try to address that outbreak early on before they get established. I don't know that we were able to get in there early on, but we deployed enough assets to feral swine that we could be successful, and that's a good thing. If you see any feral swine or any of your landowners you work with see feral swine, we'd encourage you to report it either to the DNR, District Wildlife Biologist. It'll all filter back to us, or you can call us directly at 1-866-USDA-WS. And that stands for U.S. Department of Agriculture and Wildlife Services, 866-USDA-WS. That'll actually ring in our office, and we'll go ahead and take the call and try to work with you to get information on what you saw or what they saw and confirm that there are or are not pigs there. And with that, looks like I'm okay for questions.
Yeah, you got time.
So see if we have any questions.
What was the source on the trichinosis for the feral swine?
How are the feral swine getting trichinosis? That's a good question. Traditionally, through time, people would feed garbage to their swine, and the garbage contained undercooked meat, and then the swine would get that through time when people pasture farrowed. We don't know how the feral pigs got trichinosis. We really don't have a good indicator for that. Do you have any ideas?
There's none left in the domestic pig population.
Correct. Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, is there a wildlife, I mean, they.
A reservoir in wildlife?
Yeah, something like that?
I don't know. I have no idea. Rodents, from small rodents eating rats, mice, voles, maybe?
I know about rats.
Okay. That's a good question. I'll come back to
So
you.
they could contact African swine fever also.
Yeah, I didn't have time to go into everything. So African swine fever is a tremendous issue for Asia and Europe right now. Highly contagious disease, devastated the pork industry. The U.S. has collapsed what we're doing. We can't take any swine from over there. There's a huge concern in the U.S. that if we get African swine fever and it gets into our feral swine population, we'll never eliminate it. It'll be impossible once it gets into feral swine. I didn't cover that in the diseases, but there are a number of contingency plans now for what happens if there is an outbreak, and how are we as an agency going to deploy assets to make sure that the domestic swine don't let it get into the feral swine wherever that happens. So it could be the end of the pork industry, the international pork industry for our country. Good question. I'll come back to you.
I imagine this is more difficult with mobile invasive species, but have you guys considered taking previous occurrence records and building like a spatial predictive model or something that would highlight areas of high susceptibility to future occurrences?
So his question is, have we considered looking at past distribution of swine and building a predictive model to tell us where we might be concerned about future swine numbers? We have not been involved in that. I know our agency has looked at that some. The problem that we have is the human dimensions component blows it away, because hunters move those things by truckloads at night, and that is really, really hard to model. But I know we've looked at that for natural movements.
Like that picture there looks quite different from a domestic hog. How long does it take for them, if domestic hogs are released, to end up looking like?
So the question is, how long does it take a domestic hog that escapes into the wild to begin to revert back to its feral tendencies? And they say a matter of a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, and they begin to become feral again. These domestic swine that get out, really in less than a year, their hair is long, they've completely changed their demeanor.
Do they get those
You know,
teeth?
I think it depends on the breed, to be quite honest, because not all breeds of swine get big tusks. You know, the wild strains tend to get big tusks. A lot of the domestics, some of the domestics do not. Go ahead.
Do our neighboring states have similar regulations to prevent swine, feral swine?
And so do our neighboring states have regulations like us? The answer is unfortunately no. Some are changing. A number of states have saw the model of success here with the regulations and our approach. I can tell you that Missouri just recently, after a decade or more of promoting hunting as a way to manage swine on MDC land, Forest Service land, they just ban all hunting on state-owned land because they realize that hunting redistributes hogs to neighboring properties, forces them to become nocturnal, and hunters then have no chance to harvest them. Hunting actually exacerbates the problem with feral swine. You can kill a pig, or you can kill 2, but the rest of that sounder group, that family group, disperses and reproduces. And hunting is, while it's probably pretty fun, is contradictory to elimination of feral swine. And a lot of states have seen that now. Time for one more?
Just repeat that phone number for me.
Oh, 1-866-USDA-WS.
Thank you.
Go ahead, take
One more?
Yeah, that was
Okay,
good.
are any of your charts available? We're from Fulton County, and
Yeah.
everybody sees a feral hog today and tomorrow. And we could use a couple of those charts just to show what the distribution is.
Yeah, so call that number and ask for me, Scott Beckerman, and I'll work with you guys. We gave a number of presentations to the Farm Bureau and all early on, so we'll get you what you need. And we've got a lot of leaflets and fact sheets we can provide you.
Great.
So thanks for having me, and looks like I'm okay on time, huh?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, thanks.